Hello. I just finished reading a novel which I feel somewhat conflicted about, so I want to discuss my feelings and thoughts about it to see what other people think about this book. Because on the one hand, I found it really engaging and fascinating and so cleverly structured and beautifully written. But at the same time, I found it increasingly frustrating and claustrophobic, and it felt like it was designed to do this, to deliver a certain impact and meaning. And in a way, I don't begrudge the book for doing that, because I feel like it does come across, and the more that I think about it, the more impactful and meaningful it feels. But at the same time, it wasn't as pleasurable to read as I would ideally like a novel to be. So the book is Kairos by Jenny Erpenbeck, translated by Michael Hofmann, and this is a story that begins in 1986, and we follow in the years forward in East Germany. And Jenny Erpenbeck is an author from East Germany. And part of what I so appreciate about this book is the very different perspective it gave me, because I'm someone that grew up in America with under a kind of Western ideology. So when I was younger and witnessed through the news the fall of the Berlin Wall, that I understood it to be this great celebration of the East sort of converting to this our democratic Western values. And but this novel gives a very different understanding and feeling for that time period. Not at all, saying that the fall of the Berlin Wall was a bad thing, but it just gives a very different point of view, and one that I haven't really considered all that much before. So I found that really valuable reading this story, and so which centers around two characters of Hans and Katharina, who in 1986 meet on public transport in East Germany, and they had a slight connection before, and this romantic spark grows between them, and they have this very passionate love affair. And so we follow their story, even though the book is bookended through this prologue and this epilogue, where far in the future Katarina's looking back on this period, and she's received these boxes of archives from her former lover Hans, and sort of flicking through these memories of the past. And so the novel is structured kind of like a piece of archival research in this way, where we get the first box and all of these memories from the beginning of their love affair and its real heat and passion, and then the second box following in the aftermath as the affair becomes very toxic and difficult and horrible for both of them. And so one of the things of triggers that are like built into this relationship from the beginning is the vast age difference between these two characters, where Katarina in 1986 is only 19 years old, and Hans is in his 50s. He's 34 years older than her. He is married. He has a son who's an adolescent going into his teenage years. And so there are very different points in their life, but we follow in the first half and throughout the book, because even though it's structured like a piece of archival research, it is also structured like a piece of music. And so it combines a very information heavy account that is so detailed, both with cultural references and historical references on top of the story of their relationship, but also it flows like a piece of music. We follow the emotional highs and lows of this very tumultuous relationship, which of course, when we start reading and learn about the vast age difference between them, it sends off warning bells for anyone reading it, of saying this relationship probably isn't a good idea. And but in the beginning, in the first half, that is not really felt so much in the actual experience of their relationship, because they are in love. They have this passionate affair that they are so wrapped up in that that age difference and the differences of him having a wife and trying to work around that doesn't really matter. And in fact, it adds to the excitement of the affair. And we see how she kind of arranges meetings for him, or like surprises him at different points when sometimes when he's even with his wife, and to try and pull him aside and have a little rendezvous together. And so we follow in this passion, and which is really effectively conveyed in the narrative itself. And the way it's structured is you get these big blocks of text, and so it all kind of flows together on both their thoughts and impressions and feelings. There's no real division between them. It like moves quite quickly back and forth between them to show the real connection between these two lovers, but also all of the details of conversations that they're having, of things that are overheard, of things that are announced on the radio, and also impressions of the environment and different cultural references and pieces of theater and music that are all reproduced in these big blocks of text. And this is really effective in the beginning of showing the way that our minds work when we are in the heat of a passionate love affair. And this really reminded me of Jenny Ernaux's quite short book, Simple Passion, in which she describes a very intense affair that she was involved with, and is really looking at the mechanics of this. And something so striking about this book and what Ernaux shows is that when we are engaged in such a passionate love affair, we are kind of thrown out of the present time. And that is what happens to these two characters in the first section of the book. And as they fall into this affair, that they're not so concerned in the present as anyone who is engaged in the real heat of passion like this, because if you are not with your love interest, then you aren't really paying attention to the present. You will most likely be thinking back on the past of meeting them and encounters that you had with your lover, or you are projecting into the future of possible meetings that you will have with them, and romantically creating these designs for the future that you want to have with this person that you are constantly thinking about all of the time. And so I feel like the way that this narrative is structured like this, with all of the text crowded together like this and just flowing all in one continuous stream, it really makes sense in this way, in that it really reproduces the emotions and mindset of these characters thrown into this passion. But then as the novel moves on into the second part, and as time moves on, and as the socialist state of the GDR gradually collapses, and then we also see the dissolution of their relationship, which becomes increasingly desperate and terrifying and really violent, both physically and emotionally, between these two characters, which adds to the sense that I mentioned in the beginning of it beginning to feel really claustrophobic and stultifying, like it was really uncomfortable being caught in this relationship, which is so toxic. And but it is reflecting the changing political and national scene around them as East Germany is collapsing. And so it's so clever in that way, because both of these characters cling to both their relationship to each other and this sense of East Germany and the values of it and this world which they have grown up in and which they are critical of in some quite important ways, but also are it's so much a part of their lives that they're just kind of clinging to it, just as they continue to cling to this relationship, which becomes so horrible for them to be in, and I'm sure any reader continuously starts wondering why are they staying together, because neither of them are happy, and we see them clinging to it in really desperate ways, and anniversaries grow to become increasingly important to them, especially in the second half of this book. They start marking anniversaries of this is a year since we bumped into each other on public transport in this way, and then the anniversaries even start celebrating these horrible occasions of when she had an affair with another man and he felt betrayed, and even though he was married, and but he just looks over that fact because she has betrayed him, and he punishes her for that, and so we follow as they go through almost the motions of these different anniversaries and marking how time is passing, but in a way that neither of them really wants it to. Really, both of them, I think, are desperate to go back to a time in the passionate heat of their early romance, but also to a time when they understood their place in their country, even though there were restrictions upon them, and there were frustrations with their lives. They had found a comfortable niche in this society that they wanted to stick in, and both of them are so engaged in culture and history. There are so many references to this, to theater, to literature, to different historical periods and Greek mythology, and since it is so much a part of both of their lives, it becomes so much a part of their affair, and it's something that they discuss a lot. And so there are so many references scattered throughout this book, and part of why I felt kind of a sea while reading this is I'm sure there was a lot of it that went over my head, and that I wasn't understanding of references that I didn't necessarily personally get. But at the same time, I think it's why it makes this such a great book, because it's one that I know if I returned to it and read sections of it more closely and looked up a lot more terms and historical references, that my appreciation for it would develop even more. And so it feels like a book that is very likely to win book prizes, because it's one that I know that especially if it was read in an academic setting, or if it was studied, that you'd be able to get so much out of this book. But then just reading it as a novel for pleasure, it has these frustrations in a way, because as the story continues and things collapse, and as the first section where you are wrapped in this narrative and this very close and passionate love affair, that even though I was feeling critical of it, I was caught up in the romance and excitement of it all. And I loved the way that it really reproduced this sense to feel this, but that same structure continues in the second half as things turn very nasty, and so it became increasingly difficult for me to keep reading on, and I found it difficult to find the motivation to keep reading on, because I felt so trapped in this narrative where it was going back and forth between their perspectives, and they were caught in this routine, and that became very circular in the way that passionate affairs, if you've ever had a good friend that's been involved in a very passionate affair which goes bad, having to hear all of the details of it can become quite overwhelming, and I'm just like this just needs to end. This just needs to stop. And I kept feeling this about this couple's relationship, but it kept persisting and kept going on for years, for a long period of time. But even though I found it increasingly difficult to read, it also grew more meaningful. And what I think the author is saying with this second section of the book is, well, really posing this question to the reader of asking, why do we cling to our ideals, both our romantic and political and ideological ideals, when we know and understand that they are inherently faulty and that they are damaging both ourselves and the people around us and our entire nation. And that is something that these characters are confronted with in the second half of the book, and that Katerina is confronted with as she is looking back and re-examining this past and this history and this very intense relationship which she went through with this horrible, horrible man, and he is an absolutely despicable man. But it is so interesting how the novel not just gives us this affair, which the question of whether this affair is right or wrong isn't even really a question. We know that it's wrong, that it's a very bad affair. That's patently obvious. But what's so interesting is that even though they represent very different generations and very different point of views, they both come to this same conclusion where they cling to these ideals that they have both for their affair and for their country, and they see the complete dissolution of all of these things, and then what are they left with? What does that leave their personalities with, and what does this say about our us as humans? And because I think even though this is set in a very specific historical context and situation, it's applicable to all of our situations, and this novel prompts us to reconsider our own positions and our own assumptions that we might have about our world and our relationships and the society we live in. So it's so fascinating how this novel works. But as a reading experience, it's probably not my favorite book or the most pleasurable book that I read. But at the same time, I have so much admiration for it. I think this is quite a great novel, and Jenny Erpenbeck is such an impressive writer. I've only also read her novel Go Went Gone, which is excellent. I absolutely loved that novel unreservedly, and so I want to go back and read her other books as well. But this as a new novel is quite an impressive feat. But I'd love to hear from other readers who have experienced this book what you think about it. How did you find the experience of reading it? Do you agree with me or do you disagree with me? Please let me know all of your thoughts and feelings in the comments below. Or if you're interested in reading this now, please let me know about that now. Like, has this put you off, or has this intrigued you to experience this book? I'd love to hear all about that. And I guess it remains to be seen whether this will win book prizes or not. But I would certainly be happy if it does so. So I hope you're doing well and reading good things, and I'll speak to you again soon. Bye-bye.